In this video, we are going to implement click to move. Using your mouse, you can run around like a fool, and far too fast, of course, but the idea is he moves to within a certain radius of where you've clicked and then stops, and yeah, all is good. And he won't move towards things that are red like this tagged as enemy, only spaces that are walkable. Takes a straight line there, by the way. Okay, so you in there. So the first stage in implementing this click to move is to work out how this third person character currently moves. So if you click on the player and move around with W, S, A and D, which of these scripts is responsible? Let's try turning off third person user control. Remember to click back in the game tab or you won't be sending your input through the input manager, but it's not moving with third person user control disabled. Let's try with third person character disabled, and now he just runs on the spot. Okay, so it looks like the input is first processed through third person user control. So let's go into third person user control and see what it's doing. Open up that script, third person user control. And what I want to do is you to have a little look at it, and I'm going to talk you through it. You might want to have a look on your own now and pause it for a second if you want, or you can hang on with me and I will talk you through. So this thing requires a third-person character, so it's tightly bound to the third-person character. Keeps a whole bunch of private member variables. Then on start, it just does something that looks complicated, but it's actually quite simple. It basically says that if there's no main camera, then we're going to go to self-relative controls. We actually aren't going to need this because we're always going to have a main camera, but we'll leave it there for now. Then it goes and gets the third-person character. So on start, basically, it just gets the camera and the third-person character. Cool. So then every update, it says that if we're not jumping right now, then go and look for the jump button. But we're not doing jumping, so we're ignoring jumping, so we can move over that. Then in the fix update, which is synced with the physics engine, and it's a good place to do that because we're dealing with movement here of the character, which involves gravity and it involves the animator. So in the fixed update, it does various things, including reading the input from the cross-platform input manager, which will be getting its input from the keyboard and from, it would get it from mobile, not that this is a mobile game, but if we switch platforms to mobile, it would, or from the joysticks. It's got a C key, even, for crouch. And so there's just getting some input and setting it into some member variables. And then it's got a special case for where there is no camera, so it uses world relative directions, but we're interested in the screen relative directions, so it processes the input through screen relative directions, does some special casing for mobile input, and so on. Now, what your mini challenge is to work out which line, or more specifically, to comment out one line in this file so that the character no longer moves, but without preventing it from compiling and without it making any errors. So see if you can find the one line which is responsible for the actual movement, and comment it out. Go ahead, try that now. So if you look down here, it says sneaky little m_character, which is a reference to the third-person character, .move, and it says I want you to move in this direction with this crouch and this jump value. So if we comment that out and save our script, even though it's still running, you'll find that these aren't new errors. This is about things not being assigned but never used. Crouch is assigned but never used. That's because we took this line out. It's a warning, not an error. And it's the crouch. This was the only place crouch was used. So that's a warning. That's acceptable. But look, he's not moving. And even though I'm clicked in the game window, both the scripts are on, but he's not moving. So that's where the move happens. Okay, it makes a call through to the third-person character with a vector, a direction in which he'd start moving, crouch and jump. Now we'll rip out crouch and jump a bit later. We'll leave it right now though. So I'll bring that back in. So that tells us how the third-person character moves. So that's the first bit of our video done. Now, next up, we're going to import and review something I've written called playermovement.cs. So let's go ahead and get that script. In my case, it's in my actual folder where I'm making this video, and it is in here, and it's playermovement.cs. In your case, obviously, you just go download it from the lecture resources. Now I need to get across to my project tab to be able to get this in. Remember, you need to unzip any project resources we give you or they won't come in. Cool, so that's that. Now, before I do anything with player movement, I just want to tidy a couple of things up. I'm going to stop playing. What's this test folder? We don't need that. Let's delete the test folder. I want to make sure I definitely deleted the camera standard assets. I did. That's good. And I think that's all the tidying up I need to do for now. Yep, that's fine. So let's dive into player movement. Reload all if you see that. And see what it's all about. So here it is, player movement. Now, it requires the third-person character as well, so that tells us where we need to put it. Let's go ahead and do that right away. Let's put third-person movement against the player, like so. Okay, and now let's just see if it works, by the way. So we play the game with the player movement on, and if I click, I'm getting a object reference not set to an instance of an object. So here I have a second mini challenge for you. Without me even telling you how this script works, it's relatively self-explanatory. I'd like to try and work out why this line is erroring out right now. It's a mistake I made in the previous video, effectively. So see if you can work that out. If you can't, don't worry, and you can give me some feedback in the Q&A as to the appropriateness of this other mini challenge. I'm giving a couple of mini challenges in a video sometimes, as well as the main challenge, because the videos are longer in this course. It's a more technical course, more intermediate course. So see if you can fix that or work out what's wrong. Well, the way that I would debug that is I would say, well, this is a horrible long code smell of a ... never a good thing, but we're just using it for debug purposes here as a quick and dirty. So if I take out these things and just say, well, tell me when I click the mouse button what the camera raycaster, well, just tell me, don't actually just tell me if I've even got a camera raycaster. So just put some words out, but importantly, tell me if I've even got a camera raycaster. And that'll tell me whether there's that long string of dots that's failing or whether, in fact, no, I haven't even got a camera raycaster. So let's deal with that first. I'll put my code back. The problem is we don't have a camera raycaster. So let's look at how our code works and see where it falls down. So we store a reference to the character, the third-person character, the camera raycaster, and a vector for the current click target, which is where in the world we are raycasting to and clicking. So camera raycaster is camera main get component camera raycaster. Let's see if that's going to work. Camera main. So that's saying to the camera static method main, go and get me the it's a static method or a static property in this case of camera called main, and it tells me what the main camera is, and it goes and gets a component of it. Now the main camera is not the camera arm, but is this sub-object here, and that does not have the camera raycaster. So I'm going to move it. So let's copy the component. Go to the main camera, paste the component as new. So now the camera raycaster is over there. Temporarily just disable it on the camera rather than deleting it for a second. And let's see what happens. I can click to move. Great. So click to move is working. Before I talk you through how it works and that magic box works, let's do a couple of things. This log entry, not that one, sorry. This log entry is annoying me. This top one, the 0, the layer number, we don't need that anymore. So I'm going to just get rid of that. And the other thing is that we don't need this camera raycaster on the camera arm. So let's remove that. And actually, while we're here, the cursor script ought to be moved as well. Now that has no property set here. So I'm just going to remove the component, the cursor script in this case, and put it on the camera as well. Both of those things should have been on the camera in the first place. Great. So now your camera looks like a camera arm with a camera follow script, because the camera follow script moved the actual camera arm, the camera pivot point, and the main camera is the thing that has the raycaster and the cursor. Now the cursor doesn't do anything yet, but later it will change the cursor for us from like a sword to some walking legs or whatever you want, whatever cursor affordance is, which means indications of what would happen if you were to click here. That'll come on later. So that's that. Now we need to apply this back to the prefab, and then we need to go over to Rick's level for a minute and just check that in his level, if I click, that we can also click to move. If we can't, it's because his camera here is probably not linked properly to the prefab. Let's revert his camera to the prefab. See if it's got all the necessary bits on it. It does. Now, the other thing that could be wrong in Rick's level, is nothing of his is walkable. So let's make at least his ground walkable for him. Now, be careful if you're working with somebody else. You need to coordinate with them. We're working, I do some work, he does some work, I do some work, he does some work. But if you're working in parallel, if I was to make any change to his Rick's Village file, it would cause a merge conflict when we come to bring our work together. We'll talk about that later in the course. But for now, I'm just going to make his ground on the walkable layer and probably this little guy here on the walkable layer. And let's just see if that's worked. Still not working. So let's try and see what else could be going wrong. So the floor is walkable. Camera follow script's on there. We have the layer priority set up properly on here. So this prefab, this camera prefab has come across okay. I know what's wrong. We did the same thing with a player, right? So we go back to my combat sandbox, saving his scene in this case, but be careful when you save a scene that somebody else works in. I made a change to the player, didn't I? I added to the player this player movement script, and I never applied it to the prefab. So if we apply that to the prefab, now that we're convinced the player works in my scene, then back over in Rick's scene, provided we have the walkable layer and the player prefab updated, he should click to walk. Great. So that's big success. Back to my scene. That is, we have got that working. Now let's just take a little look in a little bit more detail about how my player movement works. So all it does after that is it says that the current click target vector is the camera raycaster's hit point. So where in space, when we raycast through the camera, do we hit? And then it just tells the M character move, that thing we saw before, to move in the direction determined by taking these two vectors away, the current click target in the world minus my current position. So it creates a vector, the tail of which is where I am, and the head of which is wherever I click in the world. Don't crouch and don't jump. So hopefully that makes sense. It says move in the direction of the difference between where you are and where you want to go. As simple as that. So here's your challenge. Get click to move working. I would like you to implement click to move. Filter for clicks on the walkable layer only, so you'll have to write a little bit more code to do that. And as a bonus, if you find a bug with Ethan circling around his destination, try and solve that as well. But that really is a bonus. So pause the video, have a go, see if you can get this movement working in your game now. Remember, you're building your RPG, not our RPG. I want you to build your dream, your RPG. Awesome. So welcome back. I've basically got clicking to move working, but what I haven't done yet is started to query about what is which layer we are clicking on. So I want to only move to things that are tagged as walkable. So for example, if I temporarily make that block red and tag it as enemy, like so. Now if I play the game and look at the console, if I click the floor, the Raycaster hits the ground, but if I click here, it's hitting a cube. And we could, instead of this log here, we could just say camera Raycaster dot, and then we could just look at the layer hit. I believe we've got directly off here, layer hit. Okay, let's have a look at that instead. So let's look at what layer the camera Raycaster is hitting. Hit enemy, hit walkable. Okay, cool. And why are they all kind of butt up against each other, hit enemy rather than hit space enemy? Simply because I don't have a space there. So cursor Raycaster hit, and then it would probably be better to say layer, space like that. And then we can see what are we hitting. We're hitting walkable, and then we're hitting enemy. Okay, good. So I've got an enemy as a distinction in there now. What we need to do is say we only want to actually make the movement when this thing, when the camera Raycaster.layer hit, is a walkable layer. So we're going to use a switch statement in this. I'm going to wrap this in a switch statement. You use switch statements when it's the same thing that you're making on the decision on for every element. Now they have some problems. You need this break thing in here, which we'll see in a minute, but we're going to switch on layer hit. Okay, so this is the body of our switch statement. This means depending on the value of layer hit, we do certain things. So in the case that camera Raycaster.layer hit is layer.walkable, in that case, you put a colon, and then what do we do? By the way, I always like to write break straight away. It's daft, it's syntactic noise, but you have to write break, and you'll see why in a moment if you've never used a switch statement before. But in the case that it's a walkable layer, then what we do is we do this. In fact, we do both of these things in the case of walkable. We set the click target and move, and arguably we don't even need this current click target, it's just noise. So let's get rid of it. Let's have camera Raycaster.hit.point directly and get rid of this whole line and that whole confusing comment. Okay, so you just move to the difference between the two. Now of course that means we don't need this current click target anymore. Thinking about it, yes we do. Look, here in the start we're setting the current click target to the current position, so that's important that we don't start moving in some arbitrary direction, that we don't start moving until we actually click. So I'm going to undo that back to how we were. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this comment on the end of the current click target line. So that's basically, in the case that the layer is walkable, we do exactly the same thing as before. I think this should work even now. So yeah, is it working? Yeah, he's moving to walkable things, but he's not continuing to walk anymore. Why is he not continuing to walk? Well, because previously this move was outside of the if statement about the input. Let's try it. If we put it back down here again, then you don't have to be holding the button down in order for him to move. Now this is a decision. If you want to have to hold the button down for him to move there, then you put it inside the if statement. If you want him to not have to have the button down, then you take it outside. But if I click the enemy, clearly it's doing nothing. So soon we're going to have to put some cursor affordances in, i.e. we need to know that this is not going to allow us to move there before you even click it and without looking in a console. But that filtering there, for the moment, has worked. It's done what we want it to do. It says that only in the case of layer walkable do we do anything, i.e. do we update the current click target. Now, I can show you how to put another case statement in. By the way, these should be indented in a case statement. The other case condition that we can put in here is we may as well explicitly start to handle case layer dot enemy. And you say, what do you do in this case? Well, in this case, we're just going to print, for the moment, not moving to enemy. Okay, and that's just a temporary printout so that we actually do something with it and break again. Now, what this break does is it prevents the switch statement from falling through to the next thing. So if it matches case walkable, this happens, and then it comes out of the switch statement. That's what the break's for. It's a bit noisy, isn't it? It's a bit strange. And you can also, and you should also, have a default in a switch statement. And if you don't expect to ever get here, then you should probably say so, print, or even we'd use an assertion later, or an exception, but for now, shouldn't be here. Okay, I can't see any logic where we would be there, apart from, actually, oops, let me just type this straight. So there is a case that default will apply, which is when we are raycasting to something else like the backdrop. But generally we shouldn't be allowing the player ever to do that. So I'm going to leave shouldn't be here in for now, just as a warning. Now, what's this complaining about? Cannot fall out of a switch statement from the final case label default. Okay, so once you get to default, what you need to actually do with these things is put return so that you come out of here altogether. Oops, if you can spell return properly. Okay, that should solve that error. Let's just try this. What I'm hoping will happen now is we click, we move. On there it says not moving to enemy, although it looked like it did. It's just a freak of how I clicked. There you go, not moving to enemy. And the other thing that we expect, I'm going to use WSAD to get over to the edge of the world, is if I was to click off the edge of the world now, then we shouldn't be here, because we're not handling that yet. And that's because it's neither the walkable or the enemy, so it does get here. Okay, so let's make a more useful error like unexpected layer found or something like that. Okay, fine, simples. All right, so what else did we ask you to do on your challenge? Let's take a look. Resolve a bug if Ethan circles his destination. Well, does he? Let's see. Let's see if we can speed Ethan up a little bit and make him a bit sharper, because I know that Rick is going to ask me to do that, so I might as well make sure he's got the controls he needs. The move speed, put a 0 on the end. The turn speed, maybe put a 0 on the end. And yeah, let's just try that. Make sure he turns nice and fast. Now, he's doing all right. So he may well have some bugs with his movement later, but right now he can move. I would like him to move a bit faster. So we could just put a move speed multiplier in, of maybe 4, and an animation speed multiplier of maybe 5, make his legs go a bit faster. Oh, well, here you go. Now when he moves fast, he's doing this weird thing. Okay, so that is something that's going to merit our attention. This is why I'm tweaking these parameters as a developer now, because the designer is going to come along and tweak these parameters, and this sort of thing is going to happen. So what's going on with Ethan here? He's going a bit nuts. Well, I think what's happening is when he gets to his destination, he is... the animator is still controlling his movement, and he's not precisely getting to where you've asked him to get to, and he's overshooting because of the animation. So we need a little radius within which he stops, so he gets close to his destination, but doesn't actually completely hit his destination. So let's go and implement that. But I do remember a warning, so let me just get rid of that warning before we go on any further. Nope, there's no warning there now. Good. Okay, so let's think about how we do that. So we're going to need a new member variable in here, which talks about something like walk, move, stop radius. That's a long name, isn't it? Now I'm going to serialize this field. Rather than making it public, but I want to see it in the inspector, but I don't want another class to be able to set it. So I'm going to make it public. I'm going to say serialize field. You'll see what that does in a second if you've never seen it before. Walk, move, stop radius. And I'm going to guess that 20 centimeters will be good enough. I'll leave it all on one line. You can do either way, serialize field like that or like that. Let's see what this does. It's going to give us a floating point, walk, move, stop radius of 20 centimeters, and in the inspector now, here it is, walk, move, stop radius is right there, okay? And that's now a tweakable parameter, and it's kind of, to me, relatively obvious what that does. When you try and do a walk move, it stops only if it's within that radius. So it doesn't go all the way up, so you don't get to the position where the position gets to the click target. You stop just a little bit before it. So how are we going to do that? Well, we could do something like this. Var, if you like, Now, we can look at what var does. It automatically infers the type. There's no harm in doing that. I know some people don't like it. I quite like it, actually, because if I want to change the type of this thing later, I can. And it is all the type is determined at compile time, so there's no chance we're going to get anything really weird. But what I'm going to write is the following. I'm going to say that the player to click point is just this thing in here, right? This difference between the transform position and the current click target. So once I know this player to click point, I'm going to say if player to click point dot magnitude, the size of that vector, is greater than or equal to the current click range. Oops. Not sure why that's not auto-completing. Walk, stop, move radius, I think we called it. Yeah, we called it walk, stop, move radius. So if the magnitude of this vector that you're asking, the vector between where the player is and where you want him to be, is bigger than the walk, stop radius, well, then in that case, what we do is we go ahead and do this standard thing. We move. In fact, we don't need to repeat ourselves. We can use the player to click point vector in the middle here. So just replace that. Cool. All right. So in this case, provided we're outside of this stop radius, we just go ahead and do what we were doing before. I've just slightly refactored this out to here. And then otherwise, in the other case, then what's going on is, now don't worry about the bracketing strategy. You can do your curly braces how you like. I'm doing them like this in this case. Let's not argue about that. It doesn't actually change how things compile. So what are we going to do in the case that we are inside that radius or on the limit of the radius? All we're going to do is not move. So that's vector 3.0. Okay, so that just says keep moving until you get to a certain radius, then stop. Let's see if that works. Firstly, with an absurd value like 5 meters. And then try clicking. Out here somewhere. What's happening there? He's definitely moving in pretty much precisely the wrong direction. So I think what's happened is I switched this around in this statement here. It should be current click target minus transform dot for position. So whenever you get vectors that are negative like that, just switch them around. The number's negative. And I've also need to put 0 in here. Okay, so just get this around the right way. Let's try again. So 5 meters, I've clicked over here. He should stop before we get there. I'm going to do this more precisely in a sec. Let's click here on that corner of that blue block, and he stops. Now, it's not clear that he didn't stop because of the red block. So let's just get a final test. I'm going to move in with WSAD. I'm going to take a clear line between here and the corner of that block. Click, wait, and he stops what looks like about 5 meters, a few body lengths away. That's good. So now, clearly 5 meters is daft. So we're going to go back to the 0.2 default and see if this helps. Turn up the move speed multiplier to 4, the leg speed multiplier to 5, which is the reproduction conditions we had for that bug. And now he's moving really fast, comically fast, quite ridiculous. I think I'll leave it like that just for Rick, because I think Rick is going to find that terribly funny, how stupidly fast he moves to within 0.2 meters of where you're clicking. He may find that annoying that he doesn't get close enough, but we can tweak that up if so. So lots of changes to the player. Let's apply the player, diligently go over to Rick's village, and just make sure that the player does his stupid movement in Rick's village as well. He does. There are different speeds in here because Rick has made some overrides of his own to these speeds. I'll leave that with him, but we know it works even in our absurdly fast case. And that's good. We've protected ourselves against the bug. We've got it working. He doesn't move towards things that are enemy tagged. Cool. All right, wonderful. So we have click to move implemented, and I'll see you in the next video.